You Booked It, episode 21. Hey, entertainers and performers of the world. I'm your host, Dane Reese, and welcome to You Booked It, where I chat with inspiring entertainers 7 days a week. By digging into their journey, we're going to discover everything you need to do to be a successful entertainer. You know, because training usually skips that part about how to actually make your skills work for you in the real world. Fellow entertainers, my drive here at You Booked It is to share the inspiring and incredible journeys of successful entertainers. We are here to support your journey. So go to youbookeditpodcast.com and join the You Booked It email community where we dig deep into truly actionable things you can be doing right now to help you book that next audition, submission, or gig. If you enjoy this free podcast, please show your support and search for You Booked It on Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast app where you can subscribe so you don't miss an episode, leave a rating and review. And to show our appreciation for your, fingers crossed, 5-star rating and review, I will give you a shout out on an upcoming episode. And now, let's do this. Okay, let's get started. I am excited to introduce my guest today, Kirbi Long. Are you ready for this, Kirbi?
I am ready, Dane. Let's do this.
Wonderful. All right. Kirbi is a Las Vegas-based singer, actor, and runway/print model, best known for her leading roles in Jubilee, Vegas the Show, Divas 3, and the touring company of West End's ABBA Mania. Making television appearances on Extreme Makeover Home Edition and NBC's The Winner Is, Kirbi moved to Las Vegas in 2012 after landing a role in Jubilee and subsequently starring in Vegas the Show at Planet Hollywood as Cher and Keely Smith. Kirbi has fronted numerous top 40 bands with Hank Lane Productions in New York City and has toured with the USO Show Troupe since 2010, with whom she opened for Katy Perry and Tim McGraw, took the main stage at the Times Square's New Year's Eve celebration, and performed the national anthem at Yankee Stadium. You can see Kirbi sailing the seas as a solo guest entertainer on numerous cruise lines, as well as touring regularly with Divas 3, starring as Anita in the national tour of ABBA Mania and one of the Carter sisters in The Man in Black. Kirbi, that is a quick intro of who you are and what you've done, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, fill in the gaps, who you are, where you're from, where you're currently calling home, and a little bit about what you do as a professional in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, of course. So I was raised in Omaha, Nebraska, and was involved in music from a very young age. I started in a church choir, I think when I was 4, and just kind of stayed in choirs growing up, and went to the University of Nebraska and funnily enough, I got my degree in business administration. And
Really?
and minored in music, in vocal performance. But yeah, I started in the Midwest where, you know, a lot of performers, when they come from there, it's kind of a struggle to know where to go because we weren't anywhere near Broadway or any of that. So I did what a lot of my Midwestern friends did and started at an amusement park and sang in an amusement park. That was my first real gig ever when I was, I think, 21.
Yeah.
And from there, and this is literally every person I know from Nebraska that is a performer had kind of the exact same experience. Went to Worlds of Fun Amusement Park, and then from there, after I graduated from the university, I went to cruise ships. I started working on cruise ships as a production singer, and my career just kind of took off from there. I guess I think that's a big stepping stone for a lot of singers in our industry. And I, you know, from there moved to New York, as you said, worked for the USO, traveled entertaining the military there, and booked Jubilee there, and moved to Vegas, drove cross country, and I've been living here ever since. That was in 2012, and now I would consider myself a touring performer. I don't work as much in Vegas as I used to. I work with about 3 different shows touring. So I'm gone a lot of the year with that, but I'm also a mom. So I'm trying to balance that and work. It's a little tricky, but that's a little bit more about me. Anything else I missed?
Yeah, that's great. And you know what? You mentioned cruise ships and how you, from there, you said your career just kind of took off. And I find that what's really good about ships is that everyone you're working with is from somewhere else. It's such a eclectic and diverse group of people just within production casts in general, which I think is really great because we have, we become friends with all of our castmates, and you get to learn about all the different opportunities that exist around the world and the other things that people have already done in their careers. And it kind of opens up your eyes to what is available to you.
Absolutely. I mean, my first contract was on Carnival Cruise Lines, and I think I was one of like 2 Americans in the cast.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And you're right. I think everybody in those casts has a slightly different experience than you, and so it really does open up your eyes to different opportunities that you wouldn't have known about. It, for networking purposes, it's kind of the best way to start, I think, if you're going to go into this industry. And also just the experience of traveling and all that, it's fantastic as well. So
Yeah, it's loads of fun. Sometimes I think of cruise ships. It's weird to me that people sometimes still give them a bad rep, but the thing is, I think they're brilliant, and they really are, in a lot of ways, a crash course into discovering of if this industry is actually for you.
yes, absolutely. I think I worked for Carnival, and then I went with and worked with Gina and Ryan Productions after that. And I worked on cruise ships for about 5 years, on and off. Um, and it really does give you a feel for the industry. It also gives you a lot of stage experience that you wouldn't get. I mean, if I had gone straight to New York and been auditioning, it probably would have taken me 10 years, in the amount of time to get that amount of experience singing lead on stage. There would be no way I could have gotten that amount of time, honestly, on a stage in New York at that young of an age. So I'm very grateful for that experience on ships, for sure.
Absolutely. And I also love that you mentioned, you're very much a touring performer now. You're here, there, everywhere, touring for different shows, different gigs, things like this. And I want to bring that to how Vegas is kind of a really great city to call home or to be a hub to travel out of. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So like I said, I work with different touring shows all over. We mainly tour the US, but being in Vegas, you can kind of go anywhere really quickly from here. So touring from Vegas is actually fairly easy. If I lived back in Nebraska, it would be a little trickier in terms of flights. But yeah, Vegas is a fantastic place to call home. It's relatively inexpensive to live here. There's quite a bit of opportunity in town if you want to gig as well. So if I'm between dates that I've been touring with, I can easily find work here. As I know you mentioned in my resume, print model and stuff like that. There's a lot of industries that are very related to ours, like modeling and runway and such, that you can find gigs between gigs here. So I really like living here, and our experience in Jubilee that we both share has been pretty vital in the networking process. I think in terms of gigging here, that's the main reason I'm able to do it, is because I have such a fantastic network of performers and friends who do what I do, and we just kind of help each other out. It's a pretty fantastic industry to be a part of here. Very tight knit people. That's my
Absolutely.
experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to the next section. And look, I am a sucker for a good quote. What is your favorite quote that you'd like to share with everyone?
I am also a sucker for quotes. And it was hard to pick one. I love that commencement speech that Jim Carrey gave. Have you seen that?
I think I've only seen a few clips of that.
Okay, if you have a chance, watch it from like the beginning to the end. It's pretty great. But he says in the speech, you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take the chance of doing what you love. And I think that's just so applicable to our industry. I mean, I know I've many times wanted to give up because it's just very hard sometimes. It's so competitive and you get a whole lot more no's than you do yeses. But, remembering that this is my passion and that this is what I've always wanted to do since I was a little girl, I think that quote is so applicable. Anyways, I really love that because he was talking about basically his father and that his father was a fantastic comedian and could have been very successful, and decided when he had a family that he needed to stop stop his passion of
Hmm.
comedy and just get a safe job. And so he did. And then he was fired from that job a few years later, and they struggled for years to support themselves. And it goes to show you, you can fail at performing, you can fail at accounting, you can fail at any of these things. So you might as well just take a shot and do what you've always wanted to do. You got one life,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. So, Kirby, of course, you're an entertainer. I'm an entertainer. And I think that you would agree that this entertainment industry is one of the most subjective, brutally honest, personally emotional industries in existence. And you know as well as I that to create and to have a successful career in this industry like you're having now, it takes a lot of dedication and hard work. And while,
Mm.
of course, yeah, there is going to be an outrageous amount of fun, excitement, being an entertainer, being on that stage, there are also our fair share of obstacles, challenges, and failures that we're going to experience inevitably. And we're going to have to move forward through them. Tell us, what is one key challenge, obstacle, or failure you've experienced in your career, and how did you come out the other side better because of it?
There's a few obstacles I've experienced. I think just on a broader level, just the no's, as I talked about earlier, just the no's that you get
Mm,
auditioning are they build your character, and you stop taking things so personally, and it makes you stronger. So in that regard, I think just getting no's constantly is really important if you're going to be successful, because you have to know how to keep going and push forward and believe in yourself. But recently, my biggest obstacle, I would say, challenge, I don't know if it's necessarily an obstacle, but challenge is being a mom. After I had, and I know your wife and I have discussed this, but after I had Corbin, my 4-year old, getting back into the business was very difficult. I've also noticed this industry kind of looks at you a little differently once you become a mother. Some of the opportunities I had prior to becoming a mom were plentiful, and then you know hours after you have them, all of a sudden those opportunities kind of disappear and people stop calling. Um, and so I think making yourself, reinventing yourself, I guess, as a singer, as a performer after becoming a mother was a very challenging time for me. I I had a really hard time with it. It took me about a year to get back into performing after I had my son. As you know, Dane, he had some medical challenges that also increased that time.
mm.
That didn't allow me to get back as soon as I would have liked. However, it took me about a year to get back into it, and it's been kind of a slow and steady pace since. Only this past 2019 was it really starting to pick up again, to a pace that it was at prior to my having my son. So I think becoming a parent in general is challenging. It kind of makes you reprioritize what's important, and your time is a lot different. You don't have as much time to commit to marketing yourself and auditioning and all the things you were able to do so easily prior to. It's a challenge, but it's doable. I think if any of us are planning on being parents and you're not a parent yet, it's doable. It does take a lot of effort, though. That's definitely the biggest challenge recently.
For sure, I can absolutely empathize with you on that one.
Yeah.
But it's great. You're right. It's a complete switch of the way you view and prioritize time.
Yes.
All right, well, let's move on. to a time that I like to call your spotlight moment. That one moment in time you realized, yes, I am going to be an entertainer for a living. Or maybe it was, yes, I need to be doing this as an entertainer. Tell us about that.
When I talked about this earlier, but when I was working at the amusement park in Kansas City, I was on stage I think we did the show 250 times that summer. Like we worked really hard.
Whoa.
And it was really, really hard work. And I think we barely got paid anything. I was basically just working for free. But it was then that I realized I really wanted to do this, that I would be willing to work as hard as I did and make barely anything. I was so happy. And I don't think I had a choice at that point. I think I realized that if I was going to be happy in my life, I had to be performing. I always knew I wanted to perform as a very young child. I knew that I had the talent to do it. But it wasn't until that summer that I realized that I could actually do it for a living. Very modest living at that point.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that was a collection of moments, I guess, that summer that made me realize, yeah, this is really what I want to be doing. It made me so incredibly happy to be on stage. And when I left the stage professionally, when I was going back to college and that next year, and I wasn't performing as often as I was that summer, I was kind of sad. It made me sad. And I think that was kind of the realization that I needed to make the jump into doing this professionally.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's piggyback on that question quickly and let's talk about your number one booked it moment. Walk us through that day, the auditions and callbacks, if those happen to be a part of it. What was going on in your life, and what about that moment makes it your favorite booked it moment?
This is kind of a strange one because I didn't book it, but I do want to talk about this because I think it's important to realize how important auditioning in general is.
Yeah.
When I was living in New York City, I had booked the USO show troupe, so I was working um, quite a lot for very little money again, but loved it. But I was auditioning for The Voice, and I went into the audition room. It went well. I didn't book it. And I came out of the audition, and there was a girl standing there. And she said, "Hey, I heard your audition. What's your name?" And we started talking. And she said, "I'd like you to come in and audition for this cover band that I perform with. It's a collection of corporate bands, and they need singers." I said,
Yeah.
"Okay, cool." So I did. I went into that audition and I booked that. And I was doing that alongside the USO when I lived in New York, and it supported me. I never had to work as a waiter when I worked there because I had this corporate band gig and I had the USO. And that same voice audition that I didn't book, I got an email the following year asking me if I would like to audition for a different show that these producers from The Voice were doing. And I said, "Well, sure." And I booked it. I booked that show, and I was on NBC. And it was a show called The Winner Is. It was an interesting experience to say the least.
Yeah.
But and from there, I booked other things, and I'm here now in Vegas. So obviously, I had some success in auditions. But I guess my point is, just because you don't book an audition doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, and doesn't mean you shouldn't put yourself out there, because a lot of opportunities will come just from the process of auditioning. I remember in college, a girl had auditioned for Scarlet and Cream Singers. It was the university's show choir at the time. I was a part of it, and I went to the audition as well, and I booked it, and she didn't. And I remember how sad she was. And I was working in a country band at the time, and I was leaving the band to go work on cruise ships. And I called her up and I said, "Hey, I saw your audition a year ago. I saw you audition for Scarlet and Cream. I think you'd be a great replacement for me because you have a great country voice," and she worked with that band for 5 years. So I
Wow.
guess it's just important to remember that putting yourself out there will always get you somewhere, even if you don't book it that day, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that is incredible advice for everyone, young and experienced in this industry.
Absolutely. I think it's the most important advice. Honestly, if you want to stick with it and you want to do what you love, you have to be willing to take those no's and recognize that eventually you will get yeses in places you never expect from places you never expected, you know.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a moment to talk about the present. What are you working on now? What are you looking forward to? And of course, being amidst this global pandemic, how do you see the industry moving forward in the next couple of years?
Well, I'm still working with Divas 3. It's a show that tours regularly on ships, yes, but actually more prevalently recently in performing arts centers. So I'm still touring with them. However, most of our dates have been pushed to next year, as I mentioned. I also work with a Johnny Cash tribute band called the Man in Black. The lead singer is Sean Barker. He's a fantastic Johnny Cash he's amazing. He's just incredible. So I work with them as well, singing backup for that band, and it's fantastic. We'll be touring again in Canada next year and all over the States. And I'm also it's still on. We'll see if it stays, but my national tour of ABBA Mania that I sing lead in the role of Agneta. I'm still on for this tour. I'm hoping it will happen given the pandemic, but that's in January, February, and March of next year. So that's kind of my current projects. I'm personally working on a new album that I'm hoping to release in the next couple of months. I still have my Christmas album as well that I put out there every December. So that'll be a project for me in December. And in terms of the industry, it's really hard to say. I'm an optimistic person, and I do believe the industry will come back. I know it's kind of on hold right now for all of us. I
Hmm.
think once a vaccine comes, it's going to be a whole lot easier for that to happen. But in the meantime, I think some advice I've given myself is to, continue being creative and try to find opportunities that might be related to the industry, but things that I was interested in as well. Just try to stay busy doing things that might not necessarily book me right now,
Yeah.
but will keep me going. And that's I don't know what to say about the industry itself of where it's going to be in a year. I think it's all very uh, reliant, I guess, on this vaccine and what's going to happen with this pandemic. It's a strange time for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to one of my favorite sections in the interview. It's the Grease Lightning round. I'm going to ask you a handful of questions. I want you to answer them as quickly and concisely as possible, one after another. Are you ready?
I think so. Yes, let's do this.
Okay. First question. What was the one thing holding you back from committing to a career as an entertainer?
Money. Money.
Second question. Second question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
It is what it is. My old choir director would say that to me. And I think it's so simple, but it's definitely how I live my life.
Yeah, and what can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. And it's kind of like what you're talking about with the nose. I think life hands you things that you didn't expect. And instead of dwelling on the negative, you just have to accept it and stay positive and move on and just make the best of it. Um, he used to say that constantly, and I didn't really grasp. I was like, it just sounds so simple. And it's actually not, but it's a much deeper meaning by saying that. But yeah, it
Yeah,
is what it is. I say that all the time now, and now it makes sense now that I'm a little older. But John Renard, if you're listening, he knows what I'm talking about.
right. Third question. What is something that is working for you now? Or if you'd like to go pre COVID, what was working for you before our industry went on pause?
um, I think networking is really important, and it's always worked for me. It's working for me now. It worked for me pre-COVID, but just making sure that I reach out to friends who are in the same industry, and getting advice from them. It's always led me to new opportunities by just staying in touch with people who I respect in this industry, and just making sure that I acknowledge them all the time, and maintaining those friendships. It's for me the most important thing to be successful in this entertainment industry, for sure.
Absolutely. I think networking and relationships are they're most important. I mean, they're always important, but they're most important if you want to have any sort of longevity in this career.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think it's easy to want to get there fast. Um, but as you and I both know, it takes a lot of time to be successful, especially in our industry. And excuse me. And I think the relationships are honestly the only reason I am where I am. And I'm very grateful for all of them. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And the fourth question, what is the best resource, whether that's a book, a movie, a YouTube video, a podcast, some piece of technology that you found is helping your career right now?
You know, honestly, having a MacBook Pro is is where it's at. Like before I had this computer, I was struggling, but it comes with for a singer, it comes with GarageBand, it comes with iMovie, and if you're not technologically savvy, I would consider myself kind of technologically savvy, but in terms of editing, it makes it really easy for a beginner. So if you're going to invest in anything to make this easier on you, you're going to need to learn how to edit video. You're going to need to learn how to edit audio. Having a MacBook Pro is, for me, it's been vital to being able to market myself. My website is completely done by me. I use Wix.com, but there's also Squarespace and all these other, great template websites that you can build a website on. But having a MacBook Pro, I would say, just if you don't have one and you're trying to go cheaper, I would just get one, because it's made my life so much easier.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been a Mac fanboy for quite a while now, and I love everything about them, to be honest.
Yes, yes, it's been fantastic. I love mine.
Great. Well, fifth question. If you had to start your career from scratch, but you still had all the knowledge and experience you've collected from your career in the entertainment industry, what would you do or not do? Would you do anything differently or keep it the same?
I would keep it the same. Um, I think that my career has gone the way it's gone, like I said, because of the relationships I've built. And if I had done it any differently, I wouldn't have met some of the most amazing people I have met. And I really wouldn't change anything. Are there mistakes I've made along the way? Yes. But I think it's important that you do make those mistakes and you're able to learn from them. You can give somebody as much advice as you want, but they're not really going to know unless they've experienced it themselves. So I would do it all the same. Maybe make millions of dollars more doing it. But I'm really proud of where my career has gone and where I've come from. And I'm proud of the fact that I've made the mistakes that I have and learned from them. And yeah, I do it the same.
I love that. And the last question, what is the golden nugget knowledge drop you've learned from your successful career in this industry that you would like to leave with our listeners?
Something I wish someone had told me in the beginning, um, is that casting has nothing to do with how talented you are. Uh, Obviously, talent will get you somewhere, but I learned this in New York, and it was at one audition I'd been to, and I hadn't grasped, I guess, casting until this one audition. I was at an audition for an Andrews Sisters show of some sort. And that was kind of my thing at the time, because I was working for the USO doing Andrews Sisters type material. So I was like, oh, I got this. I'm perfect for this.
Right.
And I go into the audition and they narrowed it down from, 60, 70 girls to 6 of us. And I was like, yeah, in the bag. I knew it, No, I'm kidding. I really was not that confident, but I knew that this was my niche. This is what I'd been doing for the past couple of years in New York, and I felt good about it. And they narrowed it down to 6 of us. And obviously the Andrews sisters were 3 sisters. So I knew it was going to be 3 of us. And I got grouped with 2 other girls who were my height, and they had us sing together. And then the other group of girls were probably 4 or 5 inches shorter that they had chosen. They'd grouped them together. And the 3 of us sang, the 3 of them sang, and it was very obvious that the 3 of them blended and sounded so much better than the 3 of us. And obviously they booked the job and they got it and I didn't. But that experience was like so enlightening to me because I was like, there's nothing I could have done differently here. I did my best. I showed up. I had a great audition. I got to the final callbacks, but I wasn't right for the part.
Right.
And it seems so simple, but you do have to experience it yourself. So I would just say, don't get discouraged if you don't book something. You will book something if you keep going. It's just you have to wait for the right part. And sometimes it's based on your height, the other people who are auditioning as well. I mean, if I was the other girl's height, I probably would have booked it. But there's just so many factors involved in casting, and you just can't take it personally. You got to go in, you got to get a thick skin and just, do your thing, and you'll book the part that you're meant for.
Absolutely. I think that is fantastic advice.
Thank you.
And to wrap this interview up, it is time for you to give yourself a plug. Where can we find you? How do our listeners connect with you? And is there anything you'd like to promote?
Yeah, thank you. You can go to my website. It's kirbijolong.com. I'll spell that because everybody wants to spell my name with a Y. It's actually Kirby with an I. So it's KIRBIJOLONG.com. You can find all of my dates on there that are currently still happening.
Right.
We'll see if they still happen, but you can find all my dates on there. You can find my Christmas album. That's on there. You can also find that on Spotify and any of the music platforms. It's on any of those. So feel free to listen into that. And I also have physical copies. If you'd like me to send you one, I can autograph that. Like I said, I'm going to be putting out my own album here in the next couple of months. So keep an eye out for that. I'll post that on my website as well. I'm also on Facebook, same Kirbi Jo Long. You can follow me on there and like my page. I'm also on Instagram. So be my friend. But just
good.
keep an eye on my dates and I'll let you know if they're happening. Hope to see you on one of my tours in the coming future.
Absolutely. Well, Kirbi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Dane, for having me. I'm super excited we got to do this. It's so great to talk to you.
You as well. Take care.
You too.
Thank you so much for joining us today. My one call to action for you is to go to youbookeditpodcast.com and join our free email community, where we dig deep into a continually growing resource of truly actionable things you can be doing right now to help you advance your entertainment career. Don't miss an episode. We have a new guest 7 days a week. Search for You Booked It on Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast app and subscribe today. All the best to you. We'll see you tomorrow.